All right, it is 3:01 Eastern time. So I think I'll get us started. Thanks everybody for joining. Really appreciate it. This is our first time doing a LinkedIn live stream, so of course feedback is really appreciated. I'll make sure we're doing this right. Really appreciate you joining today. My name is Ben Schmerler. We're going to do some formal introductions momentarily. I want to give Joel a chance also to talk a little bit about himself. But before we start, I just wanted to give a little background. You know, ISC, the company we both work for, is an independent security consulting firm headquartered in Baltimore, and we specialize in securing high-value assets for global enterprises. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about ethical hacking and the manual process, some of the things we do, and we called it versus vulnerability scanners. What does that mean? You know, vulnerability scanners are an important tool. They're very useful in order to find out weaknesses in applications or networks or systems, but they have their limitations. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today and show some real demonstrations. So without further ado, we're going to get started. I'm going to do a few intro slides, and then Joel's going to show you some cool stuff. So here we go. Oh, one more thing before I get started. If you have questions, we are going to do questions and answers towards the end. So make sure that you get those questions in, and we'll see them in the chat and get to them towards the end. Now I just have to turn the slide over. There we go. All right, so here's the brief agenda. We're going to keep it simple today. First, just do a little intros about me and Joel, our background, and then I want to talk about why this actually matters. So we're talking a lot about ethical hacking and vulnerability scanners, but for I think many people who are impacted by this stuff, they need to understand why this is such an important issue to consultants like us. I'm going to actually stop my screen share after that and then hand things over to Joel, who's going to demonstrate with a vulnerable web application some of the things that a scanner can pull off and some of the things that maybe it doesn't give you as much of. And then finally, we're going to do Q&A where we're going to welcome the audience to ask anything they'd like to learn about ethical hacking, vulnerability testing, or whatever, where we can share our expertise. So let's keep moving forward. I'll start with my intro. You know, my name is Ben Schmerler. I'm the senior solutions consultant at ISC. I help people figure out the proper way of doing testing based on their needs. You know, what kind of assets they're looking to protect, what kind of products or technology they're using, so on and so forth. When we have somebody who's interested in working with us, I'm usually one of the first people they talk to. And with me, we have Joel, and the best person to introduce Joel is Joel. So Joel, take it away. Tell everybody about yourself.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone. My name is Joel St. John. I'm a senior analyst with ISE. I've been a security analyst, I think, for about a dozen years now. My background is primarily in web application security, though I've done a lot of work with embedded devices, offensive research, and I think network penetration testing, a fair amount of that. But I don't know. In this job, you get a little bit of everything. But web apps in particular have been my bread and butter over the years. And so, yeah, part of the demonstrations are going to be in that domain in particular. But yeah, happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us, Joel. And there's one thing I didn't include in the introductions, which is that Joel is also an expert chicken herder. Literally right before we broadcast, he was yelling out his window, herding up the chickens in his backyard. So that was pretty fun. Nice way to start our webinar off.
Yeah, try to get my kids to be nice to the chickens. Challenge sometimes.
So anyway, before we get into the demos, I just want to talk about, what's the purpose of this? Why are we even talking about this in the first place? Pen test, which is something we hear all the time, is a very loaded term. When I'm talking to someone for the first time, they always say, I need a pen test. And that can mean different things to different people, depending on what role you have at your organization, what kind of thing you're actually looking to protect, whether it's an application or a network or a business or whatever. Everybody seems to have a different definition for it. That's okay. It's kind of a catch-all term, but it is kind of difficult for decision makers to sort of understand what they're getting. They ask a bunch of different consulting firms, we need a pen test, and what are you actually getting? And you get all these different bids with a lot of often technology savvy terms. It's really not necessarily clear about what the differences are between what ISE do and what another firm might do. It's also important to know, like, what is enough? There's always more things that can be done with security, whether it's with pen testing or application security testing or other elements of security. Nobody can do everything. And it's important to understand what you are getting or what you are trying to achieve with any kind of assessment so that you're sort of hitting that right sizing. You just don't want to find out later you did it wrong. And sometimes cheap can be expensive. So what do I mean by that? When you don't do testing right the first time, it often means that maybe it's the compliance auditor, maybe it's when you go for your SOC 2, or maybe it's actually experiencing an incident that you find out that perhaps your assessment methodology wasn't the right approach. I think oftentimes when you read about in the news, when people have some kind of security incident or some sort of data incident or what have you, that they regret not taking an approach that maybe could have led to a better outcome. So it's really important to understand what the methodology is first, so that you're really getting the type of assessment you need. Real briefly, I want to talk about scanners, and we could probably extend this to other tools as well in the hacking tool belt. And I'm definitely interested in Joel's thoughts here as well. Here's a few things about scanners, both good and maybe not so good. They can be simple, they can provide a lot of information and are very useful, but they don't do everything. They don't always give things like context or provide absolute certainty when it comes to outputting a vulnerability and how it's scored. And you often have to follow up to give their true effectiveness. And I'm going to turn it over to Joel here for a minute. Joel, do you want to talk a little about scanners and tools and when you're doing an assessment, how you utilize them and sort of where they're really helpful for you and how they help your process, but also how maybe you need to work with them a bit?
For sure, yeah. It's so in the assessment work that we do, there's a whole, I don't know, broad array of tools that you might use depending on the application or even the framework that you're testing. For me, given I do a lot of like web application testing, that tends to be a lot of like Burp's Active Scanner, maybe some static analysis tools like SemGrep or Brakeman or a handful of others. But I find them most useful when I've got an app that is just so large that I couldn't begin to look at everything in the short amount of time that we have for an assessment. So,
Right.
we're brought in for anywhere from maybe like 2 to 4 weeks or so. And depending on the application that you're testing, that might be enough time to get deep in a few areas, maybe get some like kind of shallow testing on some other areas, and being able to come in and kick off either static analysis or some sort of tool while I get started on my manual testing. It's a great thing to like, I don't know, midway through the testing or a little bit after, I get to go back and look at those and kind of triage and figure out, what are the false positives? What are leads that I want to follow up? What are things that maybe I have missed in my manual assessment? And so it's a very nice uh, accompaniment to the work that we do. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
that's.
Well, tell me if I'm wrong with this metaphor, Joel, but I mean, it's kind of like when somebody is on the beach and they're using a metal detector to search for lost rings and stuff like that. The metal detector will blip a lot. It'll give you a lot of noises. And it would be really hard to find things on the beach just digging around in your hands and just looking for stuff without the tool. But the metal detector is also going to give you some Coke cans and and other garbage too. So it's sort of
For sure.
if you're going to be successful doing that sort of thing, you kind of have to have both the tool and the person along to get the best results. Or am I off base on that?
No, I think that's a fairly good analogy. Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, let's move on. What we specialize is in manual testing. We advocate for what's called the white box manual approach to application security and network pen testing. This is really taking to the next level. This is a graphic from our executive partners book, Hackable, which you should check out if you're interested. Um, Doing things like analyzing design and running a scanner and looking for vulnerabilities, these tools can do that, but really smart people like Joel can do things that scanners don't. abuse functionality, chain exploits. A scanner's not going to do that. It's just going to look for things and see what it identifies, what matches what it's looking for. Somebody like Joel, when he's actually attacking a product, can actually go and find out much more interesting things and create proofs of concept. So if he's going in and he's doing an assessment, he'll be able to figure out, well, what data was I actually able to extract and what was the business case because of the manual testing I was doing. Joel, do you have anything to add that you think is interesting on this?
I think one of the biggest differentiators to me is that when you bring in somebody to do the manual testing, like they're actually trying to understand your product. Like they want to know what this thing is, how it works. They're gonna interview developers. They're gonna actually make that effort to get the bigger understanding of what this thing is and the potential threats to it. And so um, a scanner isn't necessarily going to do that. I'm personally interested in where things like AI are going to end up in that domain, but
Yeah.
I think they're going to be in the hands of people like myself just to enable more effective testing. But um, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that comes to mind.
All right, cool. Thanks. Appreciate that. So how does this play out? I'm gonna actually disable my screen share right now, and we're gonna hand it over to Joel, who has some examples. So he'll give us just a moment here, and we'll change some of the screen shares, and then we'll walk through this. And I might ask a few questions as you go, Joel.
For sure. Before I start the share, maybe I can set the stage just a little bit. And so,
Oh, yes.
I listed some of the tools, that I use on a pretty regular basis. And I took those and pointed them at an internal application that we've developed here at ISE. We use it for training as part of our interview process for a variety of different things. But essentially, the premise is that it was created to be purposely vulnerable and a mechanism for people to test out their skills, to learn new things, or for us to gauge, say somebody's applying to work here, we want to make sure that they can do the job. And so no shortage of vulnerabilities with this thing. Like you poke a little bit and something pops out. And so that seemed like a great target for some of these tools. Let me go ahead and start
Yeah.
sharing here.
Another benefit is it's not a real application, so nobody's in actual danger.
That is true. All right. So here, I just got to move a couple things around here. And I think that's actually the other one that I want. So this is the application here. So it is designed essentially to be a like file storage system. So you can upload files. You can add some like site-wide comments to things. Let me just go ahead and log into it here. And so fairly simple in terms of the functionality. But up here we have a few different options, and the two that we're going to really look into today are the uploading of assets and comments that you can make on things. And so the first one here to maybe talk about maybe the comments is a good place to start. But I'm going to click this, and there's going to be a bunch of spoiler alert: the tool did manage to find some cross-site scripting. So the first thing I'm presented with here is an alert box, which is interesting. Actually, I'm just remembering this now, but one of the I don't know, unfortunate situations that I've ended up in the past is using Burp's active scanner with a little bit too reckless abandon and actually having it break the application that I was testing. UI was pretty SQL heavy, and it triggered a SQL injection, and all of a sudden, hey, the app doesn't work anymore. And it did that on day one of my test, which was not a fun time, but just thought about that. So I started here. I made a simple comment, one word comment. And then I went into Burp and I took that request. So I might be able to just go into that here. Can you see that all right? I've got it kind of zoomed in, so it is a little bit.
That looks pretty clear to me.
Okay, cool.
People might be seeing I'm going to move the camera around. Hopefully people can see
Got it.
the relevant stuff. Yeah.
I tried to make it large enough, but
Looks great.
Here's hoping. So that first one here, I think I'm going to be able to get to it from here. If it'll give me the details. Oh, it's chugging. All right, so the comment one here. So if we look here, we've got a pretty simple post request to add a one-word comment. And the way that I executed this scan was, if we've got some, pen testers on the call here, you can right click and just do active scan. And it just kind of magically goes and it runs a ton of tests. I think it actually logs it pretty well these days. It didn't used to in the past. It was kind of this like black box that you didn't know exactly what it was doing, but it would sometimes pop up some things. But that was the methodology here. Is that just simple, run an active scan and see what pops up. When that happened, that generated all of these comments in here, and we have we have quite a bit. I think there's something like 1,400 or more. And then if we go and actually look at the results here, so issue. So as we saw, might be best. Can I sort this by severity? Yes, I can. Okay, the first one, yeah, it found some cross-site scripting. That was great. We saw that, right off the bat. It popped up in my face. That was great.
Yeah.
I think this reflected cross-site scripting was probably valid as well, though a little bit harder to execute because you've got to trick somebody into making that request.
Yeah.
But these were both valid. It
And
seemed to think that there was some command injection in here. Sorry, were
I
you
was
going to
just
say
going to
something?
say, Joel, for those who maybe aren't familiar with cross-site scripting, that's a pretty big one, right? I mean, that's a vulnerability that we see a lot during testing.
It is, and there are so many ways that it can present itself. But in this case, if anybody on the call is not familiar with cross-site scripting, essentially we have tricked the application in this case into storing some malicious HTML and JavaScript, and when that page is loaded, it's misinterpreted by the user's browser, and it actually thinks that it's code. It should be data. It thinks it's code.
Right.
It executes in this case. It does something super simple just for demonstration purposes. Pops little alert box. But using that vulnerability, you can essentially perform actions as that user. So anything they can do, you can do using cross-site scripting. Depending on how things are scoped, you might be able to just like outright hijack their session, be like steal the session token. That's one of the I don't know the big examples given, but that's a little bit harder these days with some of the protections. But if you have cross-site scripting, you can get their browser to do what you want essentially. Anything I'm leaving out there? Does that all make sense? I mean, I know what
I
cross-site
think
scripting is, but
yeah, I think that makes sense. It's essentially when you have a field and you're trying to give it data, which is usually like a name or a username or something like that. And instead of giving it what it's meant to take, it's taking something else and then executing it. Sort of if again, I like using metaphors. It's these are not the Jedi you're looking for kind of thing. The stormtrooper wants to get a response, and you're telling it something different, and then it executes based on that deception.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so to talk to, I guess, some of these other ones here. So this command injection, it seems very certain that something was going on here. And if we actually look at the advisory here, uh, it included a double quote. And it turns out that it thinks that because in the response, oh man, this is very zoomed in. Maybe I can do that. Because we had this error that echoed the response that we had, it thinks it's command injection. Turns out it's actually a SQL injection issue, which it detected separately. So that's great. That's something that I think a scanner is pretty good at finding. But this one absolutely a false positive, and so I think a human that's there can probably differentiate that pretty quick. It's like, oh hey, no, that's a SQL error, not something else. I can maybe look into it a little bit more and poke at it, but eventually, yeah, this false positive. Um, Cross-site request forgery. That is another one that I think is pretty simple to find via Burp's active scanner. So if you don't know what cross-site request forgery is, it's essentially when a third-party website tricks an authenticated user into making a cross-domain call back to your application. And if the application, well, nowadays you kind of have to shoot yourself in the foot a little bit in terms of either other vulnerabilities or uh, misconfigurations. But if you don't have the right protections in place, then it will execute that action as if it were the user. And so,
Wow.
example, I think when I was, I don't know, very new at all of this in the early days, the example they give was like a bank transfer or something like that. So it was like, I want to transfer money to this account. And if the application can't tell that the user didn't intend to uh, execute that. And so here, absolutely a good one to find. I think a human would probably find that pretty easily as well. But yeah. Moving on, we've got like the TLS certificate. It's not a good one though. This one might be because I am so I'm not like blasting out the server IP. Um, I'm kind of doing some magic to get it to work. Things like security headers, it's great at spotting stuff like that. So like, yeah, hey, there's we don't have HTTP strict transport security enabled on this site. That's totally valid, something that you would want to have. It can look at the response headers and know that that's totally a thing. Um, we get further down into here, and these are maybes. Like I'd have to look in a little bit more, but I don't remember them. But they also give you like areas to kind of follow up a little bit more.
Yeah, I was just
Um,
gonna say, is it safe to say that a lot of these items are like breadcrumbs, if you will? They're giving
yes.
you the places where you want to start and really build off of.
Yeah, and that's like when I'm using a scanner like this in my day-to-day work, like that's pretty much how I treat it.
Hmm.
I do really like Burp's cross-site scripting scanning, I guess. Like, but I use it in a completely different way, and I should actually maybe demo how to do that. I don't know if right now is going to be the right time for that, but you can essentially coerce the burp scanner into refining exactly where you want to be scanning versus taking that whole request and just scanning every part of it, because it's going to try to inject cookies, it's going to try to inject a bunch of the headers, it's going to do all this other stuff, and you can use another one of burp's tools to kind of fine tune that. It's like I just think this parameter is the one that matters. For this case, it would be that comment, right? That's what I really wanted. That would have given me probably better results. But it can blast through hundreds of payloads much faster than I can. I still like to do it manually as well, but I love Burp Scanner for that. So I think that's probably a good place to leave here with Burp. The let's see, the second feature that we were examining is this upload asset, and this is something that a consultant, pen tester, whatever, you see a file upload, and all of a sudden you're very interested because there are so many things that can go wrong when you are uploading files to a server. And so in this case, I had Burp. I think I uploaded a simple text file. Let me go here. I think it's under home.
And
Just
notice it says it upload to our very secure website, so it's secure because they said so.
absolutely, yeah, they
Yeah.
said so. Look at that. We've got something really simple. If I go into Burp here, we can actually look at. Here, let me close down that one. I think I can. Yeah, the assets upload. So similarly, it's a very simple request. It's a multi-part form. You've got a file in here with simple contents. And then I ran that through the exact same process with Burp, and now you can see I also have just tons of files now here, that which is great. If you actually care about that, it can be a little bit of a pain to clean up after something like this. I've ended up in situations where an errant scanner has required me to then write some scripts to automate the removal of all of the artifacts that just got created as part of this process. Um, but yeah, we can actually go and look here in the results. So yeah, I think that's not the one I want. I think this might have been, yeah, it might have been combining the two here. So I can separate it maybe a little bit by time, perhaps, because I did the one first and the other second. So I don't think it found very much at all using this one. It did find, I want to say, no, those are all comments.
Those are assets upload. It says under the path.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but nothing that was particularly high. And so, um, yeah, I don't think it found much at all with a file upload. But when you're actually doing that testing, again, like there are so many things that could go wrong here. So in this case, if you wanted something as simple as a cross-site scripting attack, maybe I would just upload an HTML file, and if that is not served as an attachment, then perhaps I could get script execution that way. That's totally a thing that you can do. Not caught in this case at all. I think the main reason for that is that this is a slightly more complicated process, right? Like, not only do I need to upload this file, I need to go and then observe the results of that file. And so, one of I think the key takeaways to using these sorts of tools is that the more complicated either the attack or your application or just whatever you're doing is, the more likely that a scanner is just not going to perform well.
Yeah.
And luckily, humans are pretty good at discarding noise. And sorry, it looked like you were going to say something.
I was just going to ask a question. Like, what do you think of the scoring and stuff like that? It's categorizing these as like, medium or high or critical or whatever. I mean, do you think these scores are accurate? Do you think that without context, like how do you look at those sorts of things and compare it to your own judgment?
I think they're pretty reliable with burp. I think so. Cross-site request forgery in this case. I guess spoiler alert to anybody that might be looking at this application. It is across the entire thing, and so it's not just this one route that is vulnerable to this. It's the entire application. And at that point, this isn't a medium to me. Like
Right.
that's usually a high, because now I can abuse any of the features within the app. There's likely something that's going to be sensitive, and so like that, I would probably upgrade. But
Yeah.
given that it's
But
only this one instance, a medium I think is reasonable. Go ahead.
yeah, but and yeah, of course, though, like as to your example that you just pointed out, I mean, this is why the context matters, is that somebody might
Sure.
react to a scoring like that in a different way based on whether somebody scored as medium or high.
Yeah.
So and so I think that's a really important thing to bring up.
Yeah, and that's actually an area that we take a lot of care to do correctly, because in the consulting world, like, that is our main deliverable to a client. It is
Yeah,
our report, talking about the risks, the vulnerabilities, and all of that. And we multiple rounds of review to make sure that we are in agreement on how severe something is, because yeah, our clients absolutely triage this based on our risk ratings. And sometimes that's how they'll approach trying to fix these things. And so we take a lot of care. A scanner, it just doesn't have the context, and so it tries,
right.
and like, I think it does an okay job. But yeah, that bigger picture thinking can do a lot. But
Yeah,
um all right, so maybe to talk a little bit about some of the other attacks that are possible using this. In this case, so when you have a file upload, usually I've got several things that come to mind. So one, I talked about first, something like cross-site scripting. Like, if I can upload an HTML file here and it just renders it in the same domain as the app, then maybe I can point somebody at that file and, hey, now I've got a cross-site scripting vulnerability.
Hmm.
That's absolutely a thing here. Not picked up on this. I think a human would be able to find it in minutes. Another big one, and the one that I really wanted to demo, was something called XML external entity injection. So if you're not familiar with that vulnerability, essentially you can upload XML data, and it is misinterpreted and ends up being processed by that like XML rendering engine to do malicious things. So depending on the deployment and everything, like in the worst case scenario, you might end up with like remote code execution. I think that's usually like PHP apps that good old PHP that is a thing with. But the way that I usually have seen it is either a denial of service attack, something called the billion laughs attack, if you're familiar. But essentially, you can take a kind of a short XML document that is a bit recursive or self-referential, that just it explodes in terms of its size. And so if that is rendered by the application, then it goes boom pretty quick. Another big one is reading local files or server-side request forgery. So that's when you kind of trick the application into making web calls to, say, an internal endpoint or just some other endpoint. The one that I wanted to talk about here was the XML external entity injection. I took the if you go to like it's either burp or OWASP or something like that, and you take the most basic example of how to use this attack to read local files, that works. And so the example here, maybe I think I got it right here actually. So I could probably, so I want to read this file, Etsy password. So for demo purposes, that's something that we often use because, it's not the shadow file, so there aren't actually password hashes, but it really demonstrates that, hey, I can read something that I probably shouldn't be able to. And again, this is about as basic of, the version that you could expect in something. We upload that to this, and then let me see if I can find it here. Go, nope, not that. Oh, I had a bad shortcut. Control, not window key. If I look for XXE here, and then I go to view this asset, sure enough, it is processed incorrectly, and now, hey, we get the contents of Etsy password.
Wow.
When I was doing this as part of my interview process, this made it great because now I could use this to read the source code running on this application. So it wasn't really provided as part of the assessment. For our assessments, we would often get source code, but this let me read local files, and I could go and find, like, say, the controllers that were running things here, and it helped me find all sorts of other things. And so Burp again didn't really have knowledge of how to go and view the results of the scanning that it did in this case in particular. Um, Burp wasn't the only thing that I used. I'm going to preface this the next one. So I also ran SemGrep. If you're familiar, you've heard of SemGrep. You know that tool, correct? It's a
Yeah.
I don't know, very very hip static analysis tool. I'll be honest, like I use it all the time. It is incredibly useful. I thought it would find this, but it did not.
Mm.
And I've got the results here. I don't know if that is worth sharing because I think we're I think I've spent more time than we perhaps allotted.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
To get to your point, though, it's just that this is something that was completely missed, and in a real life scenario,
Mhm,
we could be making, again, security decisions about how to remediate or how to manage products or services, et cetera, based on results that are somewhat incomplete.
mhm.
And I think the broader point is when you put the resources into actually following through and not just letting everything automate, you're probably going to have more meaningful results.
Yeah, I think these things are great tools to have in
Yeah.
your tool belt, and it's like I'm incredibly grateful for the people that have designed these tools because they have
Yeah.
saved me a lot of time and effort and work, and so they're great. But
Yeah.
you can't just run a tool. Like you could do that in addition to some other things, and I think actual like manual testing of your apps is a big one.
Yeah. if the whole process of securing websites and applications and networks and all this stuff was as easy as clicking scan a bunch of times, we would have a very secure thing. We wouldn't hear about any breaches. But the reality is that it requires more, especially for things that are really, really important. You know, the
For
things
sure.
that have particularly sensitive assets behind them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have those SEMGREP results. One of the things that I wanted to mention that it did find. So it turns out there is uh, remote code execution vulnerabilities in the application, and SEMGREP, sure enough, it highlighted exactly where you might want to look for that. Burp didn't really see that necessarily, but SEMGREP it finds great things. It found a bunch of the cross-site scripting, SQL injection, stuff like that. I think these tools are really amazing when you have, say, a massive application and you find some cross-site scripting and then you realize, oh, this is everywhere. There are dozens of instances of it. That's when a human becomes much less useful, and where automation can really help. And one of the things that I really like about SemGrep is that you can kind of customize it. So if you use it internally, you can start writing your own rule sets based on your code base, based on the patterns that you're seeing in vulnerabilities in your application, so that you don't end up repeating it. So it's great at that. It can cover a lot more ground if you've already kind of identified something. And so um,
All right,
one
great.
thing that I like, we've talked a lot about application security scanners. I think there are a lot of parallels in network security scanners. So uh, to me, like the big one is going to be something like Nessus, right? Like I've been in
Yeah.
situations where, hey, I've got 2 weeks to assess an internal network with thousands of live hosts, each running multiple services. Nessus is my best friend in that sort of case because it can start covering that ground, and it can you know do that much faster than I might be able to. But similar sort of problems. But yeah, I'm gonna end up rambling forever, and I don't think we have forever.
Yeah.
So
I want to make sure we get in people's questions too.
absolutely,
So
I'll,
why
I'll
don't
go ahead
I
and stop sharing here.
yeah, I'll take over the screen share, and I think we're pretty much at the Q&A piece. One thing I'll say too while we're doing all this is so stop it. There we go. And here we go. Sorry, bear with me. Let me get through my slides. Okay, great. Q&A is now. Sorry, I had to do a little technical stuff there. Yeah, I mean, to the point Joel was making, if you have other questions about how something like this might play out, if you want to see more of the results, et cetera, we can certainly follow up either right now or after the event. So, we're happy to take any questions you have right now. One big takeaway I would say from all of this is really make sure you understand. And again, this goes up and down the line, whether you're dealing with maybe a very small business that just wants to protect, local assets, PCs, servers, whatever, all the way up to major enterprises with tons of things that they manage, services that they've developed themselves, so on and so forth. So anyway, make sure you understand that, and make sure you understand what you're actually getting and what you're actually doing, because there's going to be different methodologies and techniques that are right for different groups. There is no, it's like snowflakes. There's no one size fits all when it comes to doing testing.
For sure.
So with all that being said, I have not looked at the chat. I don't know if we have any questions in the chat so far. I have not seen any, but feel free to drop them in, and we'll stay on for a few moments and are happy to answer any questions from those of you in the audience. Any questions at all? Bueller. I do have a general question that I'll ask Joel. So
Sure.
can you elaborate a little bit about connecting business logic to results, right? So
Mhm.
how do we approach when we're reporting and we identify something that from a technical perspective, how do we actually talk about how do we talk about like what the actual impact of the organization is? How do we actually turn this into something tangible instead of just a big line of technical stuff that maybe a decision maker doesn't maybe understand?
I mean, for at least a lot of the like high or critical risk vulnerabilities, like those often end up, somewhere in like an executive summary. So like I when I am I don't know, mentoring like junior consultants, like our report is something where there are going to be multiple audiences, and so having a good high level overview on like what was found, the like real world impact in kind of plain language is very desirable, whereas we'll have the more in-depth technical details for actual devs and stuff like that. So trying to do that in the report. But yeah, I'm not is that I'm not sure that's answering your question though. Like,
No, I mean, I think you're getting at it. I mean, I think ultimately we're trying to understand what there has to be a part of this process where the consultant has to understand what the business does, what an actual asset means to them. We don't know when we're testing something what is of actual import, right? Like we have that has to be articulated to us from an impact perspective, and we can consult on this, of course. But what we're trying to do is because we were able to do these things technically, we were able to hop from this to this, or escalate privilege, or inject code, or what have you. As a result, we were able to do this, and this is how it could impact the business, and which is ultimately why you would take action on it. And these things should be reflected in a report. This is kind
yeah,
of one of the ways scanners they're just not going to know. I mean, a scanner doesn't understand what an asset actually is; it just sees something. Uh,
yeah. And I would say also that's something that we tend to handle, like we have a kickoff call at the beginning of a project, or
right.
sometimes even as part of like the scoping process. Like I want
Absolutely.
to know what is valuable to you and what like the I don't know, the holy grail of vulnerabilities might be. And so those are questions that
Yeah.
we'll ask in the beginning, just to kind of tailor how we deliver an assessment.
Yeah. And the effort too. Like the
Yeah,
reality is that we could put infinite amount of effort into doing any kind of test and find more and more and more. I mean, the more time you give us, the more we could potentially find. But there's the point of the expression, is the juice worth the squeeze? And we need to find out what we're actually juicing in order to find out how much we have to squeeze it. Um,
yeah. Um,
I have a kind of a doozy of a question here. So the question is, what was ISE's thought process on what slash how to update your internal vulnerability scanner to align with the emergence of AI vulnerabilities?
I do they mean like vulnerabilities found by AI or vulnerabilities within AI? I kind
I'm
of
in,
I'm thinking the
I'm
former.
interpreting the way that's written as vulnerabilities with the AI, but maybe we should
Mm,
approach it from both angles and give some comments either way. That way we'll.
yeah, so we don't really I guess operate internal vulnerability scanners necessarily, like because the bulk of what we do is manual pen testing.
Yeah.
uh we will often use tools. People will have ways that they've customized it on their own. But as far as like our clients, they might be doing some of that. But um, yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer to that one.
Uh,
AI in particular is kind of this black box that we're
that's
still
yeah.
figuring out.
We get a lot of questions on AI in general, and obviously this is an emerging technology which has dramatic implications not only to security testing but to how we do our work, how we write
Absolutely.
creatively. I mean, there's all sorts of ways in which AI can help and also maybe not help us so much at times. I would say as a broad rule, um, whether it's an internal vulnerability scanner or an assessment process or whatever, we really shouldn't be resting on our laurels when it comes to methodology or how we do stuff. Technology and security in general are constantly evolving. And if you're doing the same stuff that you're doing, 3 or 4 years ago, you're probably making a mistake. because chances are in that time, either new vulnerabilities were discovered, there are new facts that we have, the value of an asset has changed, the technology we're working with has changed, all of this stuff that makes that makes the methodology that made sense when we adopted it uh, less relevant. And so this applies to anything from vulnerability scanning to the tools that you use to the defensive measures you take to how a product is created or developed. Um, these things have to be reviewed constantly because the context and the landscape in which these things operate will change. Um, even when we do reassessments and we have clients who maybe do work with us for several years and have commitments with us for several years, we're not so rigid as to say that the scope or the way we engage with something a year from now is going to be the same. We have to go in with the expectation that the test we run next year will probably be different than the test we run this year, just because something will be different. And we don't even have the foresight to know how things are going to be different exactly. I don't think anybody does. If they say that, they're probably not being honest. I don't think anybody has that crystal ball.
No, but I mean that, yeah, something that we try to handle as we're starting that assessment. So, hey, what's changed in the application? Like, new
Yeah,
code tends to be more vulnerable than the old code. Um, yeah, there are ways that we try to do that, but it's a very hand wavy is probably not the right word, but like subjective process. So,
yeah.
yeah,
I think another thing that's probably going to happen too is that AI tools will be integrated into products that we assess, right? So, like, just like we have third-party integrations for different APIs, et cetera, you're going to have AI integrations. And how does that AI interact with a regular web application? And it's going to change the way we approach attacking it and doing testing. Um, it's another factor that you have to consider, like anything else. It just has to come into as part of the decision making process.
yeah, I can definitely see something like AI getting integrated into like a linter or something for a developer. Like, oh, hey, you're writing some vulnerable code, and I know that because I have this large, model built of what vulnerable code in say like PHP or something looks like. I could see that being useful. I would be surprised if somebody's not already doing that.
Yeah, yeah. Any other questions? Anything else people want to answer or hear an answer
I
to?
I see one more on LinkedIn.
Oh,
It
okay,
is
good. I have less visible. I think it's because I'm screen sharing. I don't see it all.
Yeah, I barely saw it. So, but the question was, what is a good way to learn how to code? I think cross-site scripting proof of concept, so that in this case they want to make their own tools. To me, that was something that was very hard, and I got that experience through offensive research. So I really enjoy hacking on devices, and in particular things like routers and printers and cameras and things of that nature. Something where we've got like a web application that was designed by a small team with perhaps a strapped budget. You find all sorts of fun things in that sort of environment. People building like custom solutions to do crazy things on an embedded device, and so you see things like command injection and uh, cross-site scripting and all of that, and it's just very high impact. And so, in our day-to-day, like we don't get paid necessarily to develop a complex proof of concept for something like this. That's why we use something like an alert box. It's like, hey, this is a practical demonstration of what is possible here.
Yeah.
But in this other case, I am either filing for a CVE or as part of uh, talking to the people that have developed a product. There's this mantra that POCs don't lie. A proof of concept, a working one, it's really hard to deny that your vulnerability is a thing when you have a full on proof of concept. And so I built up that skill set by testing these devices that are very likely to have bugs, that are likely to have multiple bugs, and writing exploit chains for those. And so it's a fun process. I definitely recommend it for anybody that's interested in that. Like my advice to junior consultants is to go buy like the cheapest router that you can find on Amazon
Hmm.
and just see what you can find. It's probably going to be something.
Yeah.
And I don't know. You'll have fun if
Good,
you're anything
good.
if you're anything like me, anyway.
Thrift stores are a good place too. Grab the $3 router that's sitting on somebody's shelf somewhere that has lost support from Linksys or whatever. All
Yeah,
sorts of ways that, like most things, it's getting started and just trying stuff.
for sure.
Uh,
Yeah, it's
anyway,
experience, I guess, is is uh,
cool.
the hard answer.
I clearly, Joel, you have more visibility on the questions on LinkedIn. As I said, we're still learning how to stream on this platform. So, is there anything
It
else pop up in terms of questions?
it sent me a notification, and that was the only way that I knew. I
All
don't see
right,
any more
cool.
notifications, so
All right, great. Well, I think
hope
we
that
can
might
wrap
change.
things up. I think we can wrap things up here. Again, thanks for joining us today. Feel free to go to our website, check out anything that we have there if you want to learn more. And of course, reach out to me and or Joel. You can connect with us via email, LinkedIn, whatever. We're happy to talk with you. We love having these kinds of conversations. And that's one thing that you can learn working with a bunch of ethical hackers is we love to talk about this stuff. So thanks again for joining us. We're going to do this again real soon. If you have other things you want to hear about in the future in a future webinar, let us know. We're always interested in that kind of feedback. Joel, really appreciate you joining me today, helping
Thanks
us
for
out
having
and
me.
sharing your insights.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining. It's been
All
fun.
right. Take care, everybody.